let's kick things off with a pretty huge idea. What if the human brain isn't just a computer running calculations, but is actually a translator? A device that takes the raw, fundamental reality of the universe and converts it into the stories, the myths, and even the sciences we use to make sense of it all. So think about this puzzle for a second. On one hand, you have an ancient story about a thunder god, hurling lightning bolts from the sky. And on the other, you've got a modern textbook with a super complex equation for electromagnetism. Now, are these just polar opposites? Or could they be two different languages, myth and math, trying to describe the exact same underlying force? That's the mystery we're going to try and solve today. All right, so to crack this puzzle, we're going to need to look at two very different sets of clues. The first set comes from the hard reality of physics, and the second, well, that comes from the long, winding story of what humans believe. Let's start with the physics. So what is the actual ground truth of our universe? Well, science tells us it's surprisingly simple. I mean, everything that happens from a star exploding to a cell dividing in your body is all governed by just four fundamental forces. And here they are. You've got gravity, that universal pull we all know. There's electromagnetism, which is the force behind light, electricity, the whole shebang. And then you have the strong and weak nuclear forces, which basically hold atoms together and also allow them to change. This is it. This is the physical rulebook for reality. That's our first clue. Okay, so let's pivot to our second set of clues and see how this all starts to connect. Long before we had the language of physics or math, humanity was still experiencing these forces every single day. We felt gravity's pull, we saw the flash of lightning, we witnessed the cycles of decay and renewal all around us. The big question is, how did we encode those experiences? And this is where it gets really fascinating. Just look at these parallels. The physical force of gravity, attraction, gets encoded in our myths as things like love or fate. Electromagnetism, a force all about polarity, becomes the cosmic struggle of good versus evil, light versus dark. The strong nuclear force, the one that binds matter together, shows up in our stories as sacred covenants or the idea of unity. And the weak nuclear force, which governs decay, well, that appears in our myths as apocalypse, rebirth, and transformation. Across countless cultures, these exact same patterns repeat. I mean, it's just too consistent to be a coincidence, right? But wait, it gets even deeper. The way our ancestors actually structured these forces in their stories wasn't static. It actually changed and evolved depending on the structure of their societies and the challenges they were facing. This slide shows that evolution perfectly. You see, some cultures, like ancient Zoroastrianism, imagined a universe locked in a battle between two equal powers. We call this equal dualism, and you often find it in societies facing constant external conflict. But then other cultures developed what's called hierarchical dualism, where one power is supreme and evil is just a subordinate rebellion. This structure, which you see in later Christianity, for example, reflects a society that's focused on internal order and a clear chain of command. So here's the crucial point. We have these objective physical forces on one side, and we have these deeply patterned human stories on the other. But what's the link? I mean, what's the bridge that connects the two? This is the key question, right? We've seen the evidence, these uncanny parallels between the laws of physics and the themes of our myths. But what is the actual mechanism that bridges that gap? And the answer is the brain itself. The theory calls the mechanism the stress-straining media. Now, that sounds super technical, I know, but think of it this way. It's not a metaphor. It's a description of the physical process our brain uses to act as a lawful translator, converting the raw energy of reality into the meaningful patterns that we call thought. So how does this translation actually work? Well, it's all physical. Think of your brain as this incredibly dynamic medium. Every time a neuron fires, every little electromagnetic pulse, even the literal mechanical stress and strain on the brain tissue itself, all of this creates unbelievably complex patterns. And it's from these physical patterns that our thoughts, our feelings, and the grand stories of our cultures emerge. This quote just nails it. The brain's process is truthful because it's absolutely bound by the laws of physics. It can't cheat. But it's also interpretive because the meaning that pops out on the other side is shaped by our experiences and our culture. The brain isn't just making stuff up, it's translating physical truth into human meaning. So, what does this all mean for us? Well, it gives us a completely new framework, a new map for understanding human thought. Instead of seeing history as this simple, straight line from wrong myths to right science, we can see it as a series of ever-evolving translations of the exact same fundamental reality. It all leads to this really powerful three-layer model. At the very bottom, layer 1, you have reality, the four forces, the unchangeable truth. In the middle, layer 2, you have the translator. That's the physical brain doing its job, converting that reality into patterns. And at the top, layer 3, you have culture, the final projection of those patterns as our myths, religions, and sciences. It's the entire journey from objective physics to our subjective experience. And this reframes everything, doesn't it? It suggests that ancient myths weren't just fake stories. No, they were humanity's first best attempts to translate the dynamics of reality using the symbolic language they had. And science? It isn't the opposite of myth. It's just a different, more precise translation, using the language of mathematics. They're both products of the same human hardware trying to describe the same universe. So we'll end with this thought. If your brain is constantly translating the universe around you, what language is it speaking right now? Is it the language of myth, of logic, of emotion, science? And maybe more importantly, how is that personal translation of yours shaping the world you see every single day? It's a pretty powerful question to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.